Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, America. It is Good evening, America. It is Sunday, June the 28th, 2015, and it's time for news and commentary with a dose of conservative common sense.
On the eve of our struggle for independence, a man who might have been one of the greatest among the founding fathers, Dr. Joseph Warren, president of the Massachusetts Congress, said to his fellow Americans, "Our country is in danger, but not to be despaired of. On you depend the fortunes of America. You are to decide the important question upon which rests the happiness and the liberty of millions yet unborn. Act worthy of yourselves." Well, I believe we, the Americans of today, are ready to act worthy of ourselves, ready to do what must be done to ensure happiness and liberty for ourselves, our children, and our children's children. From time to time, we've been tempted to believe that society has become too complex to be managed by self-rule, that government by an elite group is superior to government for, by, and of the people. We are a nation that has a government, not the other way around. And this makes us special among the nations of the earth. Our government has no power except that granted it by the people. It is made up of men and women who raise our food, patrol our streets, man our mines and factories, teach our children, keep our homes, and heal us when we're sick. Professionals, industrialists, shopkeepers, clerks, cabbies, and truck drivers. They are, in short, we the people. Their patriotism is quiet but deep. Their values sustain our national life. With the idealism and fair play which are the core of our system and our strength, we can have a strong and prosperous America at peace with itself and the world. So with all the creative energy at our command, let us begin an era of national renewal. Let us renew our determination, our courage, and our strength. And let us renew our faith and our hope. It is time for us to realize that we're too great a nation to limit ourselves to small dreams. We will again be the exemplar of freedom and a beacon of hope for those who do not now have freedom. We are a nation under God, and I believe God intended for us to be free.
Some very important words and very powerful words from the late Ronald Reagan that I think everyone in our nation needs to hear today. If those words did not give you goosebumps, and if those words did not inspire something into you, I think you need to go back and listen again, because it is something very important with everything that is facing our country today, especially what happened this past week. We are certainly facing a very difficult time in our country. We have a progressive plague that is taking hold in our country. And it is up to us today to stop this progressive plague and take our country back so that we have a great nation, that we still have the American dream for our children and our grandchildren, and for their children and for their grandchildren, and for all of our future generations. I will remind everybody that Martin Luther King wanted everybody to be judged on the content of their character, not on the color of their skin. Martin Luther King wanted everybody to be equal in our country, and that can happen through hard work and the American dream. Well, folks, it is great to be back on the air with you tonight. I am Dan Butcher, and you are listening to News and Commentary on Pundit Press and SHR Media. You can listen to the show at punditpress.com as well as shrmedia.com. Well, here in a few minutes, we're going to be joined by some great guests for what I hope is a very, very entertaining and a discussion that you're going to learn something from, because you have to remember that the goal of this show is to get the truth and the information out to you. We're going to be joined by Susan Knowles. Susan is the host of Stand for Truth Radio. She is also a very prolific writer. You can see her writings at The Blaze and various others, as well as her own website, and we'll let her give you all the particulars of that here in a few minutes. Also, we'll be joined by Sean Lewis. He is no stranger to all of my listeners. Of course, Sean is the host of The Edge of Liberty, which you can hear on SHR Media and Pundit Press. He is also the the chief bottle washer at SHR Media. He's also the co-host of one of the best talk shows on the internet today, which is Sackheads, and he's also a very, very good friend of mine. And people know that when Sean and I get talking, that 2 hours is not near enough time. So we'll try our best to keep it to within that time frame. We're also going to be joined by the exceptional one himself, Ken McClinton. Of course, Ken is the host of the Exceptional Conservative Show, which you can hear on Ken's own website, SHR Media and Pundit Press. Before I bring our guest on today, I want to talk a little bit about what happened this past week. And particularly, I'm going to address the Supreme Court's decision on gay marriage. And I want to specify that this was a triumph for gay rights, but it was a major loss for freedom in our country. This is a very, very telling quote that I got from a Amazon blurb for the book, The Abolition of Marriage, How We Destroy Lasting Love. And this said, marriage is disappearing as a cultural norm in America, with disastrous consequences for the social and economic stability that we depend on it. After many years of contentious national debate, without any reference at all about gay marriage in any of our founding documents or in any of the writings of our founders, our highest court judges have created a new right which is now conclusive, absolute, indisputable, undeniable, incontestable, unarguable, and settled by law. And contrary to over 200 years of legal precedent, wherein ambiguous, poorly written statutes have been overruled and sent back to the legislature for clarification by our Supreme Court, judges now assume the right for themselves to rewrite such a law themselves in favor of a prince. However, it is still not clear to our judiciary, legislature, and the president what, quote, shall not be infringed actually means. I worry about the course that the right to govern ourselves is taken. That was probably the single most fundamental right for which the revolution was fought. Yet in making its decision yesterday, the Supreme Court privileged same-sex marriage, about which there is nothing in the Constitution of the United States. And they did that over the right of we the people to decide our affairs. same-sex marriage was well along on its way to being resolved in the state legislatures in full accord with that most precious of liberties, the right to govern ourselves. Now, that right has been lost to a committee of 5. Whatever you think about the policy, it was a huge loss for freedom. It could and should have been left to play out and have the people have the last word. However, we know liberals don't know about freedom. They just care about their way, and if not, it's the highway. The main point is a question of jurisdiction, though. States decide whether cousins can marry. Some allow it, some don't, and some do it conditionally. If states can decide whether or not to issue marriage license to cousins, I think they would be the appropriate authorities to decide whether to issue marriage licenses for gays. But the Supreme Court has decided otherwise. Marriage should be a state issue. Personally, I think government should be completely out of the marriage business. But in this context, states decide what the legal age for marriage is, with and without parental consent, and whether cousins should marry. Tradition is on the side of states on this one. Is this really an issue that required being nationalized by the Supreme Court? Ireland decided the issue in a better way last month by putting it to a popular vote referendum. The gay marriage referendum won with 62% of the vote. When gay marriage wins that handily in a Catholic, tradition-bound country like Ireland, then it clearly has to win at its back. I don't agree with it, but many people do, from liberals to libertarians. Still, it's something the Supreme Court should not have involved itself in deciding. Ladies and gentlemen, this decision is a dangerous, slippery slope that threatens freedom at its very core, at its very foundation. Social mores and culture in general change over time, and this is to be expected. I have a big problem with an unelected, unaccountable judiciary defining what marriage is and thereby not allowing the states and their elected representatives to decide that. This is judicial activism at its worst. The bigger issue that is coming into focus here is the viability of our constitutional form of government. As we have seen over recent years, the president has assumed more dictatorial powers through the use of executive orders. Subsequent presidents often sustain in order to have their executive orders maintained by future chief executives. The judicial branch, where federal judges are appointed by the president, has assumed the powers of a ruling council, much like the Supreme Cultural Revolution Council in Iran. The legislature, faced with a president that can rule by executive orders and can largely ignore laws passed it doesn't agree with, has become mostly a training ground for future lobbyists. This is what Benjamin Franklin must have been concerned about when he responded to a question at the end of the 1787 Constitutional Convention. Quote, "Well, doctor, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy?" Franklin replied, "A republic, if you can keep it." The Supreme Court apparently did not even consider gay rights under the secular civil union umbrella. Instead, these activist judges have purposely pitted gays against religious groups that they believe that marriage outside of one man, one woman, it goes against the very foundations of their religious beliefs and is the only acceptable interpretation of marriage. Had the Supreme Court interpreted gay rights as having the ability to bond in a civil union, which affords them complete legal parity with straight couples who do get married, I don't think we would be heading for an enormous showdown rife with civil suits against churches who refuse to marry gay couples. So we will progress from suing bakeries to suing churches. The damage done by this ruling is immense, It is another data point on the war against Christians, in particular, who will bear the brunt of this. Will churches, mosques, temples be protected by the First Amendment? That is something that we will still have to see how it plays out. You will recall that religious-based hospitals that wouldn't perform abortions were threatened with having their federal funding denied, and among more punitive measures. What will occur now if a religiously orthodox individual refuses to perform services seen to be in support of a gay lifestyle? Will they be prosecuted for denying public accommodations to gays? These are the practical issues that will come about, which could end up as restrictions of freedom of religion, in much the same way that we have restrictions on freedom of speech. Look no further than our neighbors to the north and what has happened in Canada with the restrictions that have taken place on freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to educate your children, freedom of association, freedom to do anything since gay marriage was passed in that country. Frankly, I see nothing being settled here. What effectively has happened is that the blunt instrument of the law that formerly was used to suppress gays has now been ripped from those hands and given to gays who, judging by what happens in revolutions, will use the same blunt instrument to now punish and suppress those who don't accept gays. In practice, that will mean that the concept of religious freedom will come under attack as the orthodox among, for example, Christians, Muslims, Jews, who resist acceptance of imposition of gay values on their own beliefs will be legally attacked and, if necessary, punished for those views. Some will call this unintended consequences, a.k.a. Barack Obama. But as we have seen in other revolutionary movements, among the hardcore, the suppression of opposition was always intended. Everything has a dark side, ladies and gentlemen. The next thing we could see now is a legal challenge to the idea of marriage only constituting a couple. In this regard, there is more historical and religious precedent for marriages involving multiple partners than there are for gay couples. After that combination and permutation of people assemblage by imagination wanes, but I'm sure others will come up with some novel coupling that a future Justice Kennedy will be anxious to bestow acceptance. America should not forget that both Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton adamantly and within the last few years opposed gay marriage. Obama embraced the Defense of Marriage Act, better known as DOMA, early on, which defines marriage as between one man and one woman. He then reversed course under LGBT pressure. Hillary just looks at whatever way the wind is blowing. Both Obama and Hillary will call it evolving, and the rest of us are, quote, bigots. But it points out the true state of the Democrat Party, which now has really become liberals, progressives, etc. You know, it should probably be better known as the Populist Party, whereby the noises made by fringe groups supersede the majority will. There's an enormous push to become Euro-secular, purging the country of its foundations, true history, culture, and even its very religious beliefs. We are facing a battle for the very moral soul of our country today, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, the silent majority has remained silent far too long. Unraveling this travesty will take courage, charismatic leaders who are willing to take on the media bias and reach the people. Well, folks, I'd like to bring on our guests now and hear what they have to say about my opening rant, which I can be very, very passionate about. Let's see if I can get everybody clicked on here right. Oh, you know, first show back in a while, and everything's technically trying to go wrong. So we are joined by Susan Knows, Sean Lewis, and I do believe the exceptional one himself, Ken McClinton. So let's start with Susan. Susan, why don't you say hello to the audience and tell everybody a little bit about yourself and where they can catch your radio show and all of your writings.
Thanks, Stan. Yeah, my name is Susan Knowles, and you can find out everything about my show, Stands for Truth, at my website, and that's susanknowles.com. I have a weekly show that comes on Monday night. I write as a contributor for The Blaze and also for Joe for America. I'm a former practicing attorney. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, author, writer, and show host.
And Susan's going to have a very unique perspective from us here later, because Justice Kennedy actually taught at the law school where Susan attended. So I'm very interested to get some insight from that, from her on that as well. I want to bring on now the one and only Sean Lewis, a very, very good friend of mine. Sean, how are you doing this evening, my friend?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
Well, I'm a little bit riled up this evening, so we'll kind of see which direction the show goes. But I think it's going to be some very passionate discussion. Sean, why don't you tell everybody about all of your wonderful shows, your website, and everything you do, and where they can hear The Edge of Liberty and Sackheads.
Surely. Well, shrmedia.com is the place for both of them. Monday through Friday for The Edge of Liberty. Fridays hosted by the second best newsman of the business, my good friend Dan Butcher. And that's at 12 in the East, 9 in the West. I am also the co-host of the Sackheads radio show, which is Wednesday night at 11 on the East Coast, 8 on the West Coast, and, Twitter, Facebook, yada, yada, yada.
And last, but certainly not least,
why is he going to be last?
The one and only, the exceptional one himself, Ken McClinton. Ken, my very dear friend, how are you doing this evening?
I am doing well. This is an example of how unconscious racism is working to our betterment as a society.
We're keeping you down, Ken. We're keeping you down, my friend.
I told you should have let him go first.
Hey, you know what? I wanted to make sure that nobody could use the war on women nonsense against you tonight. So that's why Susan got to go first.
Yeah, I thought it was because I won the arm wrestling contest.
That would be true as well.
Hey, Ken, why don't you tell everybody about one of the absolute greatest conservative talk shows on the internet today. Ken, not only does he host the Exceptional Conservative Show, I think he hosts about every other conservative program out there and every other religious program out there as well. So Ken, real quick, why don't you tell everybody about yourself, although my audience is very familiar with you, just to remind some of our new listeners, because we have a ton of new listeners tonight. So Ken, take it away. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, my friend.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for inviting me tonight. And I work for Big Master Sean at SM Media. I'd be very happy that I'd be working for him. And my show, the Exceptional Conservative Show, comes on Monday through Thursday from 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. We also do an as the American Conservatives as inspiration. The American Conservatives, it's an exploration of the inspired word of God on Friday mornings at 7 a.m. and New Day Black and Red on Saturdays at 5 p.m. And so I want to thank these guys because they put my show on the air. They take a big risk with me, Dan and Sean, and I thank them so much for all their expertise and encouragement along the way.
Nothing but a pleasure.
This is. When I was putting this group together tonight, and I've had to. This is, because Sean and Ken and I, we have done a lot of radio together in the past. But actually, Susan and I have done quite a bit of radio as well together. And so, as I was coming back on the air full time, people, just to kind of give everybody a little bit of quick background about what's going on with the show and some of the changes that have made over the last month or so. Of course, everybody's familiar that Pundit Press Radio is now being incorporated into SHR Media, and SHR Media is the broadcast partner with Pundit Press on all those great radio shows. And what has happened now with with that being said and done, and coming back full circle to is going to allow me to take the reins of my show again, which was the original intent of all of this with Pundit Press and with my show, News and Commentary, because I'll tell everybody, everybody's got passionate and very loyal listeners. I have, each and every month, Pundit Press and this radio show in the past, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 million listeners and readers. And so we have a very, that gives us, and all of our people that listen to this show and all of the conservatives out there, it gives you a platform, and it just shows that we can make a difference with what is happening in our country today. And so I'm very excited to be back. The show will be on every Sunday night, and we're very excited about what's happening. And the studio is bustling here. With everybody knows that my lovely wife is my executive producer, and so we're maybe we can get her on the air in a little bit. So we'll kind of see what happens as we kind of go with the flow tonight. I want to start off with Ken, and of course, the latter part of the week, of the news week, is completely dominated. Of course, the first Supreme Court ruling was dealing with Obamacare. That was really, that was a little bit of a shock, but not completely. It was not a complete shock that ruling came down. But when the gay marriage ruling came down, that seemed to take a lot of people by surprise, especially conservatives, and a lot of the reactions that I have seen, and we definitely do, those of us as conservatives, we do have a new battle, and it goes further than dealing with gay marriage and Obamacare. It deals with progressivism at its very core, and all of our freedoms that are being taken away, and everything that is the lack of God, the war on Christians, Ken. So when you heard the ruling come down, Ken, what were your thoughts? Everybody say, boy, we got a lot of crazy judges, but it goes so much further than that.
My immediate thought was, finally, we could take the blinders off America and own up to the fact that we have finally moved away from the Second Bill of Rights and have entered the despotism required to be a member of the United Nations. And we are now moving quickly towards the Declaration of Human Rights in America. And under the Marxist regime, better known as the Obama administration, I'm looking for the day that I finally get to call you comrade.
Oh, Ken, I was going to propose to you.
That's exactly right. And some of this discussion, when we get to talking a little bit later about the Confederate flag, and I even take it further that the war that we're seeing, being waged on the Confederate flag is just the beginning. And I believe that, here in the state of Texas, the state flag, people are very passionate, very loyal, very proud of their heritage and of the state flag, and then of the U.S. flag. We've already seen Calypso Louis Farrakhan calling for the American flag to be done away with. So we'll discuss that a little bit later as well. I want to come to Sean now. Sean, my friend, you and I have had some discussions on and off about this. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I wasn't shocked on either one, believe it or not. I know, some people were more shocked about the gay marriage thing. I wasn't shocked at all.
Right.
You've seen hints of this Supreme Court deciding, and actually the Obamacare ruling was one of the biggest indicators of what was going to happen with the gay marriage ruling. Is they were going to create law from the bench, and that's exactly what they did. It's not the Supreme Court's job to create law. It's their job to verify law or kick it, see if it meets the constitutional test. That is what their job is. Everyone who thinks that they have this a job of rewriting a law to make it legal or what, no. If their whole job is to say constitutional or not, here's why, call it a day. And so once Obamacare came down, once they upheld it, which I kind of knew it was coming, I knew gay marriage was next. And I look at it as the biggest insult to states' rights and slap in the face to states' rights more than anything else, because essentially what it just said is everything can be dealt with on the federal level. Everything should be dealt with by the federal government. We just centralize government that much more. And that's how I look at it more than anything else. And then you look at the lawsuits that would be opened up on the attack on religious houses and religious groups, et cetera, et cetera. That is all there as well. But the biggest fact that the states' rights, one of the biggest, most important things in our union, is being attacked. To me, that's almost just as scary, because you might as well start erasing all the imaginary lines and just centralizing everything now.
And I'm going to come to Susan. And Susan is, I kind of have a unique take I want to get from Susan, because, Susan actually has been exposed to Justice Kennedy. And I want to stress is Justice Kennedy actually, can he still be considered the swing vote on the Supreme Court, or is he more likely to go, with the liberals in siding on future court cases? And you can also kind of give us a unique perspective, being a former practicing attorney on this. So Susan, what are your thoughts?
Well, Justice Kennedy has always been the moderate, and as a moderate, you never know which way he's really going to rule. So he is kind of a toss-up. But what we've seen today, or what we saw, last week, is that he's a full-blown progressive, and we've watched this evolution. And I really want to talk right now, if I could, just a second, Dan, to the Christians, because I think this is very unique, and I want you to hear this. When we talk about things in the Bible, like Peter denied God 3 times, okay, let me tell you a little bit of history about Justice Kennedy that kind of goes along with the threes. He was a third pick by Reagan to be a Supreme Court justice. I don't know if you remember, Bork was denied. They would not allow him. Ted Kennedy took up the banner to get Bork off as a consideration, so they had to put him aside. And then they went to Douglas Ginsburg, and he was a Harvard professor, but they found out that he had used marijuana. So Kennedy, and he withdrew himself, and so Kennedy was the third pick. And the interesting thing about Kennedy is that this Supreme Court ruling was the third time that he did a major ruling in favor of LGBT rights. So he's a big LGBT advocate, and what he did this time was totally against biblical principle. So we have the threes there with Kennedy as well as Peter, if you want to look at it as a Christian perspective.
And I'd like to remind everybody, if you'd like to join in our discussion tonight, we do have, the number is area code 516-666-9908. Once again, that number is 516-666-9908. And I will tell you right now that all of the phone lines are full, primarily to people listening to the show via their phone, and this is a common occurrence with our show. And so I will remind you, if you're already listening on with your phone and you would like to ask a question, please remember to push 1, and we'll try to scroll down the list of the switchboard and bring you on. If a line does open up, please try to call in and ask a question. Guys, there's a very interesting there's some interesting dynamics that this ruling could lead to. And after the gay marriage ruling on Friday, polygamists and pedophiles are starting to stand up for their own civil rights. Politico reported, "Welcome to the exciting new world of the slippery slope." With the Supreme Court's landmark ruling this Friday, legalizing same-sex marriage in all 50 states, social liberalism has achieved one of its central goals. A right seemingly unthinkable 2 decades ago has now become broadly applied to a whole new class of citizens. Following on the rejection of interracial marriage bans in the 20th century, the Supreme Court decision clearly shows that marriage should be broadly applicable right, one that forces the government to recognize, as Friday's decision, a private couples for love, fidelity, devotion, sacrifice, and family. That opens up for polygamy, for cousins to marry cousins, brothers to marry their sisters, for dads to marry their daughters. You name it, you can marry whatever you want to now. And it also comes down, and now the pedophiles are believing they should have their own civil rights. The Northern Colorado Gazette reported, and this was actually via Alan West, using the same tactics used by gay rights activists, pedophiles have begun to seek similar status, arguing their desire for children is a sexual orientation no different than heterosexuals or homosexuals. Critics of the homosexual lifestyle have long claimed that once it became acceptable to identify homosexually as simply, quote, an alternative lifestyle or sexual orientation, logically nothing would be off limits. And if you think that that is really far-fetched, we actually have right now, today, progressives in this country calling for pedophilia to no longer be classified as a crime, but a lifestyle. So, Ken, I'm going to come back to you, my friend.
You come back to me on pedophilia. How about that? You bet. I thought you would have gone and Sean on that one. Let me just say.
Oh.
No, but in all seriousness, what we really have done, and I want to say this succinctly, and then I'll continue on. But we have opened up a can of whoop against God. And we have decided that all the wisdom of God and all the wisdom of our founding fathers is without due consideration. And that we no longer need the freedoms observed under the Bill of Rights. So what the court did on Friday is virtually, and while the cases have not yet arrived in the Supreme Court, but I give it about 4 or 5 years, have virtually disposed of the First Amendment, have disposed of the Ninth and the 10th Amendment. So virtually the states have no say, you have no say, and we have a crony group of jurists or judges who now reign over the earth. And literally, in the idea of pedophilia, we have seemingly allowed ourselves to be seared by the reasoning of emotionally bent, passionate liberals with the idea that love, which is confused with lust, justifies moving the standard of society so far down that literally anything qualifies to be married to anything or anyone. And this is, if we were all reasonable men, we would literally find a way to impeach each and every one of the 5 that voted for those pieces of those decisions over the weekend.
And I will point out that Sarah Palin, love her or hate her, has actually called for the Supreme Court judges to be impeached. So, this is something that, is worth merit and worth discussion. Sean, you and Susan, both live in California. And California, Sean always affectionately refers to California as the petri dish for everything decadent that happens in the United States of America. And it seems like it all starts there. And so, Sean, what are your thoughts about, it looks like, if you want to go down and you want to marry your dog, you can do it. You want to marry your sister, you can do it. This is something that, you want to have 20 wives, and you can do it. You want to have your own harem, man, you're ready to go.
Well,
and I will throw this out there. This leads to something like, hey, what's to say, how our friends on the liberal left are into into engineering now, turning men into women, women into men, little boys into girls, little girls into boys. What is to stop some person saying, hey, you know what, I want to marry my own wife. I want to pick who my wife is, and so what's to stop them from donating sperm and then having a donor carry that baby to be born and raised up to become this person's wife? That sounds far-fetched, but that is what we're looking at right now, Sean.
Well, Dan, like everything else, you're exaggerating. It's not like we've ever seen anyone we've never caught anyone in the act of bestiality. We've never seen pedophilia. We've never seen incest. None of that stuff has happened. So you're just using this as an extreme. And I want to talk two things about pedophilia. I absolutely, if pedophiles want to have a civil rights for pedophiles, they can pick the bottom of any ocean they want and go down there and begin.
Bingo.
They can't bring any sort of air or anything with them, but whatever ocean they want to choose to be at the bottom of and start their civil rights bill in their own little country of pedophilia, I'm okay with. And if pedophilia is a lifestyle, what is assaulting pedophiles? Can that be considered a lifestyle as well now?
Exactly.
Because I may have a lifestyle change if it is. I'm just saying, I may have a lifestyle change if it is. Listen, it's one of those things. And first of all, Massachusetts gets the credit for kind of opening this door. My former state. Now right. I'm in the other crazy state. Doesn't matter which ocean I'm on. I'm in a state of insanity. It would seem. It is a scary precedent. And when you look at the arguments that can now be made, and like you said, you're already having these different groups start to pop up and be like, well, I deserve my civil rights too. And when you have quote unquote professionals trying to justify pedophilia as a mindset versus an illness, or as beyond illness, as far as I think, it's a frightening set of affairs. We need to take the emotional step back in the world and start to get back to what is right and what is wrong. I've said before, and I've been on record as saying, when it comes to gay marriage, I don't care what anyone does behind their closed doors. That's none of my business. I've said it before, and I'll say it to the day I die. But I don't think it's the federal government job to legislate love. They can't pass a budget in the federal government yearly. That's one of their number one jobs, and they can't do that. And now we're going to ask them to legislate emotion on any level is absolutely ridiculous. I said before, and I say it again, we already have the right where anybody can enter in a civil union with anybody else over the age of 18 and of sound mind. It only becomes a marriage, in my opinion, when it happens in a house of God. And we can argue about whether it should happen in a house of God or should not, but there are plenty of places out there where if you want to marry another guy, and there are churches out there that'll do it, but to sit there and force this legislation that now creates so many actual problems when there wasn't a big problem to begin with is a frightening set of affairs. And again, we had a Supreme Court who decided that they were going to create law, and that's frightening as well.
Exactly. And I want to come back to Susan because Susan, had some great takes on the religious aspect of this. And then after here, we might get into this before the break at the top of the hour, but on some more of this. But, in my opening monologue, and this is something that you hear me preaching quite often about on when I'm hosting the Edge of Liberty, on this very show, on any show that I'm a guest on, that we are fighting, and I truly believe this, we are fighting right now at this time, in this place, in history, for the very moral soul of our country. And, and I think you can track, regardless of a lot of the major problems that are happening, our crime rates, drug use, what we're seeing here. I think everything can be traced back to the lack of morals today, with God being taken out of our school, with God being taken out of our homes, with fathers being taken out of our homes. And this is something, you'll often hear this applied mainly to the African American community and to minority communities, but this is something that goes across all communities now. It goes across every economic and social fact, demographic that we have in our country now. The lack of morals and stability and the lack of God in our country is playing a big part in this. And I come back to this, and I'm leading into this because, that's the next step. Most homosexuals, if you talk to them, all they want to do is they want to live their lives. They want to have if you want to call it as much of a normal life as possible, that's what they want to have. They're not the militant, radical, leftist, homosexual activists like we see that are pushing this gay marriage agenda that was just rammed through by the U.S. Supreme Court. That's not what they're looking for. It's the radical activist. And what is the next step in the radical activist agenda? It's full acceptance. It's full acceptance of being able to just because your son happened to pick up a Barbie doll, hey, you know what? He's a girl, so we're going to start giving hormone therapy. We're going to start transitioning Bobby into Susie. The same thing for little girls being turned into little boys. That is child abuse, ladies and gentlemen, pure and simple. But they're looking for that to be normalized and to be accepted. For the Obamacare pays for, a lot of people don't know that that if the average transgender surgery for a male to become a female is in the neighborhood of $75,000. Obamacare will pay $70,000 of that. You and I, as American taxpayers, are paying for this. And they want it to be accepted as normal. So what is the next step? That is to force religious organizations, to force churches to accept this, to force you to change your religious beliefs, and to force churches to do and to perform gay marriages. And Susan, I'll get your thoughts on this because Chief Justice Roberts, in his dissent, he noted that churches could lose their tax-exempt status if they oppose gay marriage. And in his dissenting opinion, this is what Roberts had to say. Hard questions arise when people of faith exercise religion in ways that may be seen to conflict with the new right to same-sex marriage. When, for example, a religious college provides married student housing only to opposite-sex married couples, or religious adoption agency declines to place children with same-sex couples. Indeed, the Solicitor General candidly acknowledged that the tax exemptions of some religious institutions would be in question if they oppose same-sex marriage. There is little in doubt that these and similar questions will soon be before this court. Unfortunately, people of faith can take no comfort in the treatment that they receive from the majority today. Now, what he was talking about was Solicitor General David Verrilli, during oral arguments in April, he was asked, if this was a possibility. And he responded, he said, it's certainly going to be an issue. I don't deny that. So, Susan, your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are these. One, everything that you've just said since the beginning, you could be classified as a hater now because,
right.
The religious freedoms and everything else in your First Amendment free speech just went out the window. And I think, when you're in a society that our country was founded on the principles, Christian principles, people don't want to think that way anymore. They don't want to believe that, but you can change history. Obama has done a really good job at trying to change history, but you can't change the truth. And the truth is, this country was founded upon Christian principles. When you have the definition of right and wrong go out the window, where there is no right and wrong, anything can go. I don't think we're just looking at marrying homosexuals in the church. We haven't seen anything yet where this is going. And we have the president of our United States coming out and telling people, if you're for same-sex marriage, then help those poor, dumb Christians, really. He didn't say that, but he's implying that, to overcome their religious conviction. Because that's back progressive America. And that right there, that's the key. progressives, and we as Christians have been silent too long. And even right now, we're seeing certain groups of African American pastors coming out and speaking, and I've seen Billy Graham's son, Pastor Graham, come out and talk about it, Franklin Graham. I haven't heard any other pastors standing up and saying what Christians, leading their flock, what Christians should do with this new law, and how they're going to handle that. So everybody's sort of at a wait and see, but we're at the tip of the iceberg. Prepare yourself, buckle your seatbelt.
Well, I'll point this out. We have something in this country called super mega churches that depend solely on that tax exempt status, and so it'll be interesting to see how some of the mega churches respond to this, and if they're willing to give up that that tax exempt status to stand up for Christian values. I want to point this out, and I pointed this out in my opening monologue that that this in Susan touched on this very well, that this, you cannot stress this enough. This is a progressive plague that is trying to take hold in our country. Now, we've had progressivism try to take hold in our country for many, many generations now. Both Republicans and Democrats have tried to establish the progressive agenda in this country. But every time that it has happened, the American people have stood up and said hell no. This is ridiculous. This is not what America was founded on. This is not American values. This is not the American dream. But it's a little different this time because the progressives are very emboldened. They're more emboldened than they have been. And now they seem to have the Supreme Court on their side. Of course, they have the leader of the progressive movement in our country right now, Barack Obama. Although I would argue that it's a co-presidency with Valerie Jarrett at this point. Joe Biden just occupies an office, and they try to make sure he doesn't say anything stupid anymore. But then it comes down, even further with now you're starting to see the Republicans, a lot of the Rhino Republicans, and I'm going to be very specific and bring up Mitch McConnell and John Boehner. You are really seeing, John Boehner just got his first ride on Air Force One since he started serving as Speaker of the House. Now, that's a cozy relationship that the American people in 2014 said, that's not what we want. We gave the Republicans more power in the House. We gave the Republicans more power and gave you back the United States Senate because we want you to actually stop the progressive plague trying to take hold in our country that's being heralded and being, led by the likes of Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, anybody running for president on the left right now, but yet the Republicans are joining in with them on this and going against the will of the American people. And it's a very dangerous, thing we're seeing. And I mentioned Canada in my opening monologue. And ladies and gentlemen, a lot of the reforms when it comes to dealing with freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the way education is done. A lot of people don't know that in Canada, the government, the federal government in Canada can actually come into your home and monitor how you're raising your children. They can actually come in if they get wind of your teaching your children that homosexuality is wrong in your own home. They can take away your children. And all of this started when gay marriage was legalized in Canada. And that's a very scary thought because people often associate as America and Canada being these great partners doing everything together in North America. But yet in Canada, you're seeing limits on speech, limits on freedom of religion that we're seeing in Europe. Some of the stuff that led up to Nazi Germany. Ken, what are your thoughts, my friend?
I think you're absolutely right on the target. regarding that. I met this afternoon with several influential pastors from our particular region, and hopefully we will be collectively meeting with officials to officers of court and law to begin downloading exactly what all of this means. Because virtually, with the exclusion of the First Amendment, what right does a man have to go even into his own pulpit and speak the gospel? That would be an offense and would result in lawsuits for churches. So there are a great many concerns right now. And there are two things right now that the churches don't have that the gay mafia does have. Number one, they have finances. They can wear out with all these wealthy contributors to GLAAD. They can wear out churches in a region in just a given period of time. The second thing is that they're unified. Many of the churches that would take on or have to take on lawsuits from extenuating circumstances couldn't keep that up for very long and would eventually either go underground or have to submit. And so that comes to really, what did the Supreme Court do on Friday? Did they institute a national religion that has greater purposes and greater privileges than those that already are established under the current state? And I'm really going to pronounce to you, I see in the coming weeks, maybe not in this particular summer period, but probably by the early part of the winter, you might have large numbers of churches that would burn their 501c3 and relent for being state-sponsored churches and unify to take on any advances by the gay organizations that would love to take on churches at this particular point. And I just want to make one other comment here regarding this. There are those who would like to seize on this particular weakness for polygamy purposes, for the purposes of pedophilia, but there is one major concern that I have, and that's Sharia law. This opens the door for Sharia law to be installed in all 50 states. If you can't depend on the Constitution and justices can make it up as they go along, then quite frankly, those who have been the most quiet in all of this, those in the mosque, are looking for an opportunity to install it, and we should be very afraid.
And Ken, you bring up something very important, and I'm going to address 2 points and then go back to Sean. Here recently in the state of Texas, the openly homosexual mayor of Houston tried to actually subpoena sermons, text messages, phone call records, everything of Houston area pastors to see what they were saying about homosexuality from the pulpit. So, we're actually at a point in our time that, we've actually seen that they were able to fight that off in this particular instance. But that's subject to change now with the Supreme Court's ruling on gay marriage. And so we're to the point now where you could start seeing, if you start talking anything ill will about homosexuality, it could be considered hate speech in our country like it is in Canada. And so you could start seeing, being threatened with losing their tax-exempt status, and even going further than that. You could start seeing sermons start to be subpoenaed, text messages, phone records, government officials coming into your church to listen to what you're actually preaching from the pulpit. Although I think that is taking place at this point in time right now. Government officials coming in to see what is being preached from the pulpit by our ministers. And Sean, this is just a situation that, it's eroding the very fabric of everything that we stand for as far as freedoms.
Yeah, well, and it's one of those things, too. It's how they went about it that really scares me. And the amount of – it's like everything else. We hear it all the time. we talk about Obamacare with the president saying, well, it's been the law for 4 years now, don't try to change it. But we see what they do to the Second Amendment. We see when it's a pro, quote-unquote, conservative value, either religion, Second Amendment, free speech, things of that nature, it's constantly under attack. And on the flip side, and one of the things the progressives do better than the conservatives certainly do is when we question one of their values, we are immediately labeled as bigots, haters, racist, you name it, they do it. So I think that's one of the biggest two things that won here as well is the propaganda that was used and pushed. And I think that gets ignored as well. We already have government that comes into your home and takes your kids if they don't like something you're doing. This just expands what the something could be to speech, and that's something that's extremely frightening to me. Anytime you could be persecuted over just speech alone is a violation of the First Amendment. The fact that they're starting to curtail that, and we've already seen it in some other places. I mean, look at the president, what was it, 3 years ago, passed an executive order saying you can't protest within X amount of feet of him. You know, we've seen all these free speech zones set up at all these different events and blah, 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 all these other ridiculous ways to make people think that they're getting the freedoms that they don't need to ask permission to get or have handed to them that they naturally have. We see that under attack constantly. And we've also seen the First Amendment be abused in such a way that has kind of brought us to the point that we come today. But it also goes to show you that it doesn't matter what the cause is. In this case, yeah, it was gay marriage. But it doesn't matter what the cause is. The reality is if you start framing the argument in the only way that you want to have it and not debate it with everybody else, and what are we talking about? 3% of the country either being gay, lesbian, homosexual. It tells you how, if you get a complicit media, if you frame the argument so anybody who argues against it is a demon, and then you push it to a legislating Supreme Court, which is exactly what they are. They're essentially politicians that are making law that have never been voted on. It is quite easy to disrupt and destroy the fabric in this country, and, you know, in the manner that they did it, that's going to be legal precedence that's going to pass over to other aspects as well. And I know it's top of the hour, so I'll leave it there.
Well, we are going to take a break real quick, and when we come back, I'm going to address this with Susan and what the state of Texas is doing and what Attorney General Ken Paxton had to say about protecting religious freedoms here in the state of Texas. Well, once again, ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to News and Commentary with Dan Butcher on Pundit Press, SHR Media, Blog Talk Radio, and various other media outlets across the country. If you'd like to join in the conversation, I actually have two phone lines open. If you just want to ask a question or if you want to listen, that number is area code 516-666-9908. Once again, it's 516-666-9908. I guess maybe the federal government was listening in on our conversation and decided to hang up. They had heard enough. So we have a couple of phone lines opened up now. We are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussion with Susan Knowles, Sean Lewis, and Ken McClinton.
Radio show that covers the issues you are interested in? Well, search no more. That show is Stanford Truth Radio, and I'm your host, Susan Knowles. We'll be talking about all the issues that matter to you. My guests are political figures, best-selling authors, military men and women, and even political conservative comedians. So join me every Monday at 2 o'clock Eastern, right here on WNJC 1360 AM, and stand for truth.
If we look to the answer as to why for so many years we achieved so much, prospered as no other people on earth, it was because here in this land we unleashed the energy and individual genius of man to a greater extent than has ever been done before. Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth. The price for this freedom at times has been high. but we have never been unwilling to pay that price. Those who say that we're in a time when there are no heroes, they just don't know where to look. The sloping hills of Arlington National Cemetery, with its row upon row of simple white markers bearing crosses or stars of David, they add up to only a tiny fraction of the price that has been paid for our freedom. Each one of those markers is a monument to the kind of hero I spoke of earlier. Their lives ended in places called Belleau Wood, the Argonne, Omaha Beach, Salerno, and halfway around the world on Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Pork Chop Hill, the Chosin Reservoir, and in 100 rice paddies and jungles of a place called Vietnam. Under one such marker lies a young man, Martin Treptow, who left his job in a small-town barber shop in 1917 to go to France with the famed Rainbow Division. There on the Western Front, he was killed trying to carry a message between battalions under heavy artillery fire. We're told that on his body was found a diary. On the flyleaf, under the heading, My Pledge, he had written these words: America must win this war. Therefore, I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure. I will fight cheerfully and do my utmost as if the issue of the whole struggle depended on me alone. We must realize that no arsenal or no weapon in the arsenals of the world is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. It is a weapon our adversaries in today's world do not have. It is a weapon that we as Americans do have. Let that be understood by those who practice terrorism and prey upon their neighbors. As for the enemies of freedom, those who are potential adversaries, they will be reminded that peace is the highest aspiration of the American people. We will negotiate for it, sacrifice for it. We will not surrender for it now or ever. We are Americans.
You know, I often have people ask me, is there another hero out there? Is there another Ronald Reagan? Is there another Martin Luther King Jr.? Yes, there is, ladies and gentlemen. I believe that there are those of us out there that the words and the teachings and the beliefs of Martin Luther King Jr. and Ronald Reagan, they live within us. They are a part of us. And it is up to us as Americans. We are Americans. It is up to us that the spirit of Ronald Reagan, the spirit of Martin Luther King lives within us, resonates within us. It is time for us to stand up. It is time for us to take this country back. It is time for us to lead this country back to greatness. It is time to bring that country back to the country Ronald Reagan envisioned, to the country that Martin Luther King Jr. hoped for his little children, for his children, and all Americans, despite your color of your skin. It is time to take America back. We are fighting, once again, for the very moral soul of our country. And if we don't do it today, if we do not do it today, this fight is not for our children, it's not for our grandchildren, it is for us today. The country that we knew, the great experiment in the history of the world, will be gone. This country will no longer resemble the country that you and I grew up in for our children and for our grandchildren. It is time to come It is time to face, and it is time to cure. It is time to exterminate this progressive plague. Now, how do you do that? Very simple. Get involved. You know what? If you're too lazy to get up off your ass and go to the voting booth, I don't want to hear you complain. Our last national election, over 70% of Americans stayed at home. You have nothing to complain about, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Independent. If you stayed at home, you didn't vote. I don't want to hear you complain about what is happening today. Those of us who took the time to go to the voting booth, we did something. We tried to address this. You did nothing, and it's time to change that. Once again, how do you do this? Very simple. Get involved. If you tell me that politics does not affect your life, ladies and gentlemen, it affects everything you do in your life. And it will affect you even more at this very time, at this very place, at this very moment. Get involved. Go to the voting booth. Get involved with your children's education. It's not the public school's responsibility to educate your children. It's your responsibility to educate your children. Believe in school choice. Get the best educational opportunities for your children. Be informed. Get to know your neighbors. Become involved in your community. Become involved in your PTA if your kids are involved in public school. The bottom line is, become involved in your church. Bring God back into your home. Bring God back into our schools. Bring God back into your very heart. And we can lead this country back. We can defeat this progressive plague trying to take hold in our country. But it starts at home. It starts with you. It starts with me. It starts with Susan. It starts with Ken. It starts with Sean. It starts here. It starts now. Now is the time. Now is the moment in our nation's history. Because, ladies and gentlemen, if we don't, the American dream might not be here for our children and our grandchildren. Susan, I want to come back to you. And this has a lot to do with how the state of Texas has responded to this ruling. Texas Governor Greg Abbott said the Supreme Court abandoned its role as an impartial judicial arbitrator and has become an unelected 9-member legislature. Now, county clerks can refuse to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples based on religious objections to gay marriage, according to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. He made these comments earlier today. Now, Paxton noted that clerks who refuse to issue licenses can expect to be sued, but added, quote, there are numerous lawyers standing ready to assist clerks defending their religious beliefs, in many cases without charge. Paxton said that Friday's flawed opinion from the U.S. Supreme Court, which overturned bans against same-sex marriage in Texas and other states, placed religious people in conflict between following their faith and the U.S. Constitution. Paxton said, Friday, this U.S. Supreme Court again ignored the text and spirit of the Constitution to manufacture a right that simply does not exist. In doing so, the court weakened itself and weakened the rule of law, but did nothing to weaken our resolve to protect religious liberty and return to democratic self-government in the face of judicial activists attempting to tell us how to live, Paxton said. Paxton's opinion also noted that judges and justices of the peace can also refuse to perform same-sex marriages as others are available to perform weddings without objection. Now, of course, we have seen what has happened in the past when we've had bakeries refusing to make gay wedding cakes. We have seen what we've had in the past with a couple running a religious marriage chapel, refusing to perform gay weddings and being fined and eventually being forced out of business because of their religious beliefs. So, Susan, what are your thoughts on how the state of Texas is choosing to address this ruling?
About a minute ago, Dan. We need to start looking. We need to stop looking for leaders and start being the leaders, and understand that we don't answer to the state ultimately. We answer to God and God's rules. And if this is something that is against your religious beliefs, then you should take a stand. And I want to point out something I think that a lot of people have forgotten. I don't know if you remember the Dred Scott versus Stanford case.
Yes.
A long time ago, okay, where African Americans were told that they could not become citizens of the United States, and determined that the government was powerless to reject slavery. Now, those people then stood up, and even the president, Abraham Lincoln at the time, stood up. So, we have another situation where that was obviously against biblical principle of just total discrimination against a race or people just because, people didn't like that particular race. That's not what love in the Bible is about. And I think, if people hadn't stood up then, potentially we could have still had those same issues. And people need to start standing up, just like you said, bring God back into your life. You may lose your job. You may be hated. A lot of different things may happen to you. And I know people with kids and livelihoods are going to say, I can't do it. And they have to do what they're called to do. Whatever that may be and whatever their decision is, but ultimately know it's not the state that you're going to be answering to if you're a Christian and you have those beliefs.
Sean, I want to come to you on this. Do we, in all honesty, is this, obviously we know that this is an uphill battle. We know this is an uphill fight. But is it a fight we can win, Sean?
Yeah, it is a fight we can win. We may have to change our tactics a little bit, and we may have to change. Listen, it's really tough when certain things get out of the bag, so to speak, to put it back in. Outside of prohibition, it hasn't been too many major ones that have been overturned. There's been some smaller ones, but ones that affect such a huge population of people like alcohol did, namely my people with alcohol. But it is a possibility to turn it around. And the other thing, too, is it starts in the home. It starts about teaching morality one way or the other. It starts about teaching the principles that you want other people to observe and respect in the home, and doing what's right with you. And that goes for people on the other side of the fence. It's a two-way street, and freedom's dangerous. And just because you have the freedom to do something doesn't mean you should. And I say that all the time. So, one of the things that I've said right along is those in the LGBT community who have been so offensive about other people being offensive, if you will, if you want to have a conversation, let's have a conversation. But I think that's one of my biggest complaints with the LGBT communities. It's almost like there are some parts of it that want more rights than everybody else has versus the same. And once you start down that path, it's very, very frightening. So do I think we have a chance to do it? Yeah. Do I think that this law will ever be overturned? No, I think it's here to stay. I don't think that it's ever going to – nothing will ever change this. You may have some states that make some adjustments, but I even think through appeals and everything, it's going to be upheld just because of the way that the Supreme Court decided it. So we need to move forward and kind of need to work on our own houses, if you will, and then worry about everyone else. I think that's going to be the way to approach it.
Ken, I'm going to come to you on this. First of all, Ken, I want to hear your thoughts on what Sean just had to say.
Well, as a Black Irish man,
my brother,
I tasted the grapefruit that has grown in Ireland, and I too am smitten with the things that have happened to our race of people. But in terms of Dred Scott,
Oh, man.
That's what I'm here for, man. Chief Justice Roger Taney led the seven in the Dred Scott case. And forgive me for being very pessimistic this evening. Some people have made mention of it during sermons today that we have taken this as some great moral loss that is irrevocable. Forgive me. I will tell you this. The only way that the Dred Scott decision was changed took place on the battlefields of America. I do not see this changing, and I do see us eventually getting to a point where the U.S. Constitution will have to be, however being necessary it takes, but the repeal of everything back to the 13th Amendment, virtually, and that somehow we can sit down either at a table or on a battlefield, and a decision will be made in terms of what will come of the United States of America. And now what I'm saying is taken very, it's controversial, what I'm saying. But so was deciding to take a free man or slaveman who was considered free in one state back across the border to make him a slave.
Yeah, and Ken, you bring up something, and I'm going to wrap up this discussion on the gay marriage ruling because there's some other stuff I want to get to. But the responses by the Republican GOP presidential candidates were all over the spectrum on this decision, and I'm going to start off, with what Governor. I'm going to go through, and I'm going to highlight, just kind of the top contenders on the GOP side and what they had to say. And I'm going to start off with Scott Walker, because Scott Walker is actually right on with what you were talking about, Ken. Of course, Scott Walker has not declared his presidency, hasn't declared that he's running yet, but that is coming shortly. It's just a matter of time. Scott Walker had this to say, says, I believe the Supreme Court decision is a grave mistake. As a result of this decision, the only alternative left for the American people is to support an amendment to the U.S. Constitution to reaffirm the ability of the states to continue to define marriage. Ted Cruz had this to say. This week, we have twice seen Supreme Court justices violating their judicial oaths. Yesterday, the justices rewrote Obamacare yet again in order to force this failed law on the American people. Today, the court doubled down with a 5-4 opinion that undermines not just the definition of marriage, but the very foundations of our representative form of government. Both decisions were judicial activism, plain and simple. Both were lawless. Jeb Bush, guided by my faith, I believe in traditional marriage. It is now crucial that as a country we protect religious freedom and the right of conscience, and also not to discriminate. Dr. Ben Carson, while I strongly disagree with the Supreme Court's decision, their ruling is now the law of the land. I call on Congress to make deeply held religious views, I call on Congress to make sure deeply held religious views are respected and protected. The government must never force Christians to violate their religious beliefs. Carly Fiorino, moving forward, all of our efforts should be focused on protecting the religious liberties and freedom of conscience for those Americans that profoundly disagree with today's decision. Lindsey Graham, who's all over the place with this. I'm a proud defender of traditional marriage and believe the people in each state should have the right to determine their marriage laws. However, the Supreme Court has ruled that the state bans on gay marriage are unconstitutional, and I will respect the court's decision. Marco Rubio, while I disagree with this decision, we live in a republic and must abide by the law. As we look ahead, it must be a priority of the next president to nominate judges and justices committed to applying the Constitution as written and originally understood. Rick Perry, I fundamentally disagree with the court rewriting the law and assaulting the 10th Amendment. Our founding fathers did not intend for the judicial branch to legislate from the bench, and as president, I would appoint strict constitutional conservatives who will apply the law as written. And then Ken's favorite, Chris Christie. Our job is going to be to support the law of the land and gay marriage under the Supreme Court ruling is now the law of the land. But I don't agree with the way it's been done. And so, Ken, I'm going to start with you and come back around to get everybody's thoughts on these comments. Ken, your thoughts first, my friend.
I prefer Greg Abbott's strategy here, which says, chuck it.
Yes.
We are going to do this the right way. We're Americans. We believe in the Constitution. And as long as I live, we're going to live by the First Amendment. And no dang desperate judicial system is going to come around and take your liberties from you as long as I'm governor of the Republic of Texas. So this is what we're going to do. As for now, marriages will only be given to people who are of heterosexual descent and heterosexual pursuit. All others need not apply. I love that man. I wish he was my mayor.
All right. Sean, I'm going to come to you, my friend, your thoughts.
It really does begin to tell you who's who and what's what, right?
Yes.
Jeb Bush, who I think he spoke at Liberty University just recently, and was talking about this before the decision came out. And it's funny what Jeb, and obviously there's some other ones, Krispy Kreme and so on and so forth, but it's so funny what Jeb will say to try to make himself seem like a conservative, and says he upholds these values. Listen, I honestly believe that if he would flip-flop on that in a moment. I equate him to like Obama was 3 years ago when he was adamantly against it and for the DOMA. So Krispy Kreme and Jeb both will say whatever they can to hopefully get some money and get elected. I appreciate Dr. Carson's comments on it very much so, as well as Governor Walker. Like I said, it's just the beginning. I agree, though, with the next step needs to have language written in the Constitution to protect individual religions and houses of worship from any sort of insane lawsuit that sure as hell is going to happen if we do not get those protections in place.
I'm going to come back to what Kid said about Greg Abbott. Greg Abbott was Rick Perry was a thorn in Barack Obama's side, but that was heavily driven by all of the lawsuits that Greg Abbott filed against the Obama administration on behalf of the state of Texas. And what you're fixing to see as far as the state of Texas addressing a lot of this stuff, particularly coming down from Washington, D.C., in the Obama administration and the Rhino Republicans, you're going to see a lot of that on steroids now, with Abbott being in the governor's mansion, and then with Ken Paxton as the attorney general here. Ken I think he's even more obsessed with fighting the progressive movement and going up against the Obama administration than Greg Abbott was. Greg Abbott made a career out of it as the attorney general of the state of Texas. So I want to come to Susan. What are your thoughts on some of the things that the Republicans have said, the presidential candidates, but also what we've seen from other Republican leaders?
Well, I think everyone, homosexual, straight, Republican, Democrat, and the candidates should remember one thing, that the ruling that came down had absolutely nothing to do with the Constitution. And therein lies the problem. And that is a big red flag. So you can make all the amendments you want, but when you have a court that is making law and ignoring the Constitution, you have to stop that. And for Kennedy, here's what Kennedy said that nobody's been talking about. Kennedy said that he believes in a living Constitution that evolves with societal change. And that's all you need to know about what a progressive does, what a progressive feels, and what a progressive will do to go around the Constitution each and every time to get exactly what their agenda is.
You know, and you bring up a very important point, Susan. The likes of Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Bernie Sanders, Martin O'Malley, Elizabeth Warren, we could just go through the list. But the progressive movement, they see the United States Constitution as something that just gets in the way of their progressive agenda. They would like to do completely away with the Constitution of the United States. They think it is they think it absolutely does nothing. It applies to nothing in today's world. That's the way they see it. And they see it as an obstacle, something that restricts them. Although it's certainly, in Barack Obama's case, he certainly tries to get around it as much as he possibly can, and the Republican leadership is certainly aiding and abetting, being partners in crime with that at this point. Lock and step. And so it's a very, very, once again, it's a very slippery slope, what we're seeing with this ruling. And now as we get into the last 30 minutes of the show, I want to address the Confederate flag nonsense. And Ken, people have, they don't, the Civil War was not over the Confederate flag. The Confederate flag did not lead Dylan Storm Roof to go in and commit the crime that he committed by killing 9 innocent people in the church. But now we are seeing the call for the Confederate flag. The progressives have launched on to their next target, and that's doing away with the Confederate flag. You have Al Sharpton out there calling for doing away with all symbolism of the Confederacy. You have the progressives calling for all military bases named after Confederate generals and soldiers to be renamed. You're seeing all of the vandalism that's being taken out on Confederate monuments across the country. And I think it's going to go further than that. And I'm going to use my home state of Texas because I don't think there's, everybody, no matter what state you're in, a lot of times you're proud of your heritage. But here in the state of Texas, it goes beyond that. Texans are a very unique breed of people. Our loyalty to our state is cannot be questioned. It goes almost, in some cases, the loyalty to your state is right there with being an American. And so I see, you're seeing this attack on the Confederate flag. So what's to stop, a illegal immigrant from coming into the state of Texas and saying, oh, you know what? I find the Texas flag offensive because of the war, the war of Texas independence between Mexico and Texas, and how Texas won that, and I feel suppressed because of that. I think that's racist towards me. I see that as a symbol of hate towards Mexico. So what's to stop that from happening? We're already having calls from, once again, from the likes of Louis Farrakhan, and I'm going to come right out and say it right now, that I think that two of the most dangerous men in the United States today are Malik Shabazz, who is the former leader of the New Black Panthers, although he is still heavily involved with the New Black Panthers, and, of course, Louis Farrakhan. The New Black Panthers and you keep hearing about homegrown terrorism, but they always point to conservatives. Hey, you know what? I think you're a potential terrorist because, oh, you know what? You like to shoot guns. You like to read your Bible. You're a former member of the military. That makes you a potential terrorist. But they don't talk about the likes of New Black Panthers and, of course, the Nation of Islam, who I believe, along with La Raza, are two of the most militant and most dangerous organizations in our country today. And you have, of course, Louis Farrakhan calling for the United States flag to be done away with. And it's just not Farrakhan. Other liberals, other leftists, other progressives, progressives are calling for the very symbol of American pride to be done away with because it could be a symbol of hate. It could be a symbol of racism. But yet, we have the rainbow flag being hoisted up above city halls around the country. We have the White House, the People's House. Despite what Barack Obama said when he kicked a transgender illegal immigrant out of the White House for causing a disruption the other day, when he said, "This is my house and you be respectful," it's not your house, Barack Obama. It's the American people's house, and you're lighting it up like a rainbow. Ken, we're missing the true plague that is affecting us here as far as morality and also black-on-black crime, Ken.
Yes, I agree with you. But let me say this. There are two dangers to America. One is GLAAD, which is run by Sarah Kate Ellis, who is the CEO and president. And Becca Palmer is the executive office manager of that organization. And the second threat is a foreign threat. That's Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. He is the leader of ISIS. So I will tell you, those are the two most dangerous individuals. And let me make the comparison. What organization is tearing down or preparing to tear down monuments because they are offensive? If you buzzed in and said ISIS, you would be correct. But also, if you buzzed in and said GLAAD, you would be correct. The organization is saying tear down flags because they are offensive. If you buzzed in ISIS, then you were correct, and if you buzzed in GLAAD, you would be correct. Ladies and gentlemen, if these manifestations of world-dominating powers are the greatest threat to us, both foreign and domestic. And if we don't align ourselves as conservatives and just be gosh darn honest, listen, I don't have to like everything that everyone else does, and it sucks that I can't enjoy everything, but you know what? That makes me an American. I was born to be offended, and I was born to be offensive. And thank God Almighty that we have a nation that says that I'm okay with being that. The bottom line is I don't gain any or have a great profession of love for a woman who's going to climb a pole to take down a Confederate flag. Go home and raise your children that way. But my bottom line is this. Listen, that Confederate flag was a battle flag. It was not the flag of the Confederacy. So the bottom line is the people who are even speaking with great ignorance on this particular matter don't deserve my attention. The black-on-black crime I've been a witness of, and I've been party to. My daughter was killed by two black men. So the bottom line is there's some issues and things that we need to be dealing with that are much more important than what General Lee will be wearing at the catwalk this year.
Exactly. And I want to come back to something you said earlier, Ken, and that is about, and we're coming back to the Supreme Court's decision on gay marriage, but that is opening up the possibility for Sharia law. How did ISIS celebrate the Supreme Court's decision here in the United States? They threw 4 homosexuals off of the top of a building. ISIS, this is how they routinely punish homosexuals. They throw them off of the tops of buildings. And then ISIS also ties, cord, the explosive cord around the necks of innocent men. And then they explode their bodies. They put innocent men inside a car and then launch an anti-aircraft missile and blow the car up. And then they put 4 men inside a cage and purposely drown them. And this is the very danger that could take hold in our country in the form of Sharia law as a result of decisions like this, if we continue to allow this progressive plague to take hold in our country. Because you know that Barack Obama, particularly in dealing with the nuclear agreement with Iran, he believes in a policy of appeasement. You know what? Let's just appease them. Hey, you know what? All of these terrorists, if they just had a job at McDonald's, they wouldn't be trying to behead and blow everybody up. That is
Amen.
the beliefs of the progressives. And Sean, I'm going to come to you. What are your thoughts, my friend?
Well, going back to the Confederate flag to start, I think it's funny you went to Ken first on this segment. Number two, I like to call the Confederate flag the flag of the Civil War losers or second place winners, if depending on however they want to phrase it.
Right.
One of my biggest fears about erasing everything, and again, it was the battle flag. It wasn't the official flag of the Confederates. It was just the most prominent battle flag. There was about 22 other ones, or including naval and Marine forces or whatever. It wasn't the only flag. It just became popular because it was on the top of the General Lee and the Dukes of Hazzard in the 70s. But I'm kidding. I know it was around long before that. But the reality is blaming the flag is like blaming a gun. It's not putting the responsibility on the person that's committing a horrendous act. It's just a scapegoat. And when you start erasing history, I mean, look at Germany. Pretty much tried to erase what happened in the mid 30s to early 40s in Germany from their history books. It's not talked about, and all of a sudden we're starting to see Nazi problems pop up again. Yeah, it's not as rampant, but the Nazis are trying to make a comeback inside Germany. It's very frightening when you try to erase history and you don't teach it, good and bad. What could come about, and that's one of my other issues about getting rid of the Confederate flag. On top of it all, that. For those who look at it as Southern heritage outside of the slavery aspect, okay, we can have that argument all day long. For people like me, I could care less if it flies or not. I don't get offended by it. And I don't see how anyone here can get offended by it in this day and age, seeing how nobody lived under the oppression now that flag allegedly represented.
And, Sean, I want to bring this point up because we see a lot of similarities. Because, of course, Adolf Hitler and the Nazis, they tried to erase a lot of Germany's history to form their own history, their own beliefs. We're seeing the same thing with the Islamic State now. The Islamic State going in and blowing up ancient Christian symbols, ancient religious sites, trying to erase history, trying to change history. And that's what we see with the progressive movement in our country. They're trying to fundamentally change our country in a lot of cases by erasing the very history of our country.
Yep.
Good, bad, or indifferent. Once again, if you do not learn from history, if you do not study history, you fail to learn from it, and you make the same mistakes over and over and over again. So that is why history is so important in our country, and you cannot do away with it. And it's something that is, once again, it's something that's very, very dangerous, and it goes to the very, very core of restricting our freedoms, our freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of association, you name it, it goes to the very core of that. So I want to come to Susan. Susan, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that the Confederate flag is a false flag. It's a way to distract us. It works really well to just go out and pinpoint something and then just run with it. I mean, progressives, they have always wanted to change America by changing our traditions. They have done that with abortion, and they have done that by using homosexuals to get this, Supreme Court ruling. They have an agenda. It is to destroy America, to take down America. They're doing a good job of it so far. And while we're sitting over here worried about the Confederate flag that nobody really cares about, the president is doing everything that he wants do and get done right under our noses. So are the progressive rhinos, and so are the progressive Democrats.
Wow. We have 15 minutes left in the show, and it is just flying by. It's been such a wonderful discussion. I want to discuss, for the last few moments of the show, something that broke today, and literally a lot of this was just breaking as I was getting ready to come onto the air. But, of course, the nuclear talks with Iran stalled on Sunday as the Iranian foreign minister is prepared to leave Sunday for Tehran for consultations. The AP reported a senior U.S. official acknowledged Sunday that Iran nuclear talks will go past their June 30th target date as Iran's foreign minister prepared to head home Sunday for consultations before returning to push for a breakthrough. Iranian media said that Mohammad Zarif's trip was planned in advance. Still, the fact that he was leaving the talks so close to the Tuesday deadline reflected his need to get instructions on how to proceed on the issues where the sides remain apart. Among them, how much access Tehran should give the UN experts monitoring his country's compliance of any deal. Now, here was the main thing that happened today. The Obama administration folded. And there will be no, and I repeat, no inspections of Iranian nuclear facilities. Congratulations. If this deal goes through, we have just handed the largest funder of state-sponsored terrorism in the world the holy grail of all terrorist weapons, and that is a nuclear bomb to the Iranian government.
Or even worse,
now,
Danny, the ability to make a dirty bomb.
Exactly. And these people have the gall to call this a nuclear deal.
Yes.
It's ridiculous.
Well,
the P5+1 countries led by the Obama administration, once again, they have caved and they will not insist on nuclear facility inspections. This is dangerous. The Iranians are getting everything they want. I think in the end they're not going to have to give up one iota of centrifuge capacity, of nuclear production. Hell, we're even giving them, newer technology as far as nuclear power production. We're handing them the latest technology to do this with. And I'm gonna come to Sean because this is. I don't think people really fully comprehend how dangerous this is.
Well, I just want to be the first to welcome our new Iranian overlords and make them understand that I've always been on their side. No. Reality is what it is, and we've said this right along. He was going to do everything he could to get a nuke into Iran's hands. Why? Because he believes it will level some sort of ridiculous imaginary playing field. This guy is delusional.
Yes.
I've seen better sense coming out of a drugged rhino. There is nothing that makes sense with this guy. We know where it's going. It's a slap in the face to Iran. We have Russia that's going out just absolutely off the chain right now. We know they're trading with Iran, who even 3 weeks ago, the Supreme Leader chanted death to America, and we're still giving them nukes. Why do we not take them at their word? They say they're going to do it. They say they're going to attack us. Why is that so hard to turn around and say, yeah, you're not getting this because you guys are screwballs? They won't do it. This guy, for whatever reason, and we could talk about motive and what makes him do what he does, but he is handing the biggest supporter of terrorism in the entire world a nuclear weapon and does nothing to bolster and help our friends Israel, who are just right in the target right now.
And Sean, I'm gonna come to Ken with this now. And people don't realize this is not just a danger for the United States and for Israel. This is a danger for the entire world. Because what is to stop the Iranian government from selling the Islamic State a nuclear weapon? Like it or not, the United States has long been the defender of the free world. We have been the world's policeman, and the rest of the world has always looked at us to prevent stuff like this from happening. But yet, Barack Obama has pulled us off the world stage. He does not see America as exceptional. He does not see any difference between Kenya and the United States. He does not see. He thinks everything is equal in the world, but that is not the case. The United States is a unique experiment in world history, and it's almost like God put our country here to be the leader and the defender of the free world and freedom all over the world, so that people have something hopeful to look for. And I don't think they have that now. People are looking, saying, hey, what is going to happen? You have the Saudis right now are going, Really? You want to give they're saying Iran a nuclear bomb? This is absolutely nuts. The little dictator over in North Korea saying, heck yeah, I'm ready. How much money do you need? Because I know the United States is going to cave the next time I throw a fit and send me some more money so that I can buy some nukes from you. More than happy to it. You have Vladimir Putin, putting back the old Soviet Union, putting all the pieces of the puzzle back together today as he rides around, with his shirt off on the back of the beast of burden that he's riding at that particular moment. It's like he's got the ever-ready battery on his shoulder, saying, "I dare you, go ahead, try to knock this off," knowing that Obama will not do it, and all of these little dictators, the Castros in Cuba, the little dictator in North Korea, the Chinese, Vladimir Putin, the Islamic State, all of them know, the ruling mullahs in Iran know that Barack Obama will do everything he possibly can to appease them, and he's going to send, James Taylor over to say, that's his foreign policy, to send James Taylor over and say, hey, you have a friend in me. Let's all sing Kumbaya, Ken.
Exactly. I will say this to you, and I'm going to be very succinct about it, and it will be very controversial. We have been overthrown. That took place in 2010, and it was proven on Friday when the Supreme Court made its decision on not only just gay marriage, but also on unconscious racism and as well other particular items. We have been overthrown. We are no longer on the constitutional grid. We are in a despotism. And until Americans wake up and agree to that, you will continue to see these particular things with 435 congressmen, 100 senators, and 9 justices telling you, don't look over this way, just keep your attentions on all the nice grass growing beneath your feet. The bottom line is we are not the United States of America anymore. We have a despot-in-chief in office. We have a renegade judiciary, and we have an aloof Congress. The bottom line is there are those who have a pen and a phone, just like Lenin had, just like Hitler had. And what they're doing is they're tearing down, before the people wake up, all of the instruments that separate us and give us our freedom and liberty, or at least remind us of our freedom and liberty. And then we are watching individuals make these testy treaties and agreements with other foreign powers, like Russia having our uranium, giving it to Iran and North Korea. So the bottom line is we are not the United States of America. Until we wake up, we will continue to have these patterns.
Well, folks, we have about 8 minutes left in the show, and I'm going to come back around to Susan. She started everything off for us tonight, so I'm going to let her start to finish everything off for us tonight. Susan, why don't you give us some final thoughts on everything we've discussed today? What you think the future holds, and once again, remind everybody, where they can check out your show and all of your writings.
Well, you can check out my show, Stand for Truth Radio, at SusanKnowles.com. And I'm also, as I said, a contributor to the Blaze and Joe for America. What I think about what I'm feeling right now, I'm grieving for my country. I'm grieving for the country that I once knew, and a country that has turned its back on God. And we can see that the blessings that we had at this country have been lifted off of us at this point because we will not humble ourselves back to God. And I think we need to stop giving, Obama a pass that he doesn't understand this and he doesn't know what he's doing or whatever. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's part of the progressive agenda, just as, again, the Democrats and the Republicans are as well, who are progressive, people who have been paid and have money in their pockets for agreeing with the TPP that was handed over to the president. The plan in Iran has always been what it is. It's a way, to give Iran more power and go after Israel. And, if that happens, then, God help us all.
And, Sean, I'm going to come to you for your final remarks and remind everybody where they can check out all of your shows and tell everybody a little bit about SHR Media as well.
Well, SHR Media is a little media company run by a group of screwballs who got sick of mainstream media and decided we were going to do it ourselves and really get some good partners on hand and try to bring, the best in conservative media that we possibly can, get a good message out there and have a whole lot of fun while we do it, which is why we do the Sackheads radio show on Wednesday nights at 11 Eastern. I also host the Edge of Liberty Monday through Thursday at noon on the East Coast, and on Friday, Danny Butcher hosts that for me, and I'm completely thankful for that because it's the best ratings of the week, really. And then, obviously I'm on Facebook at Edge of Liberty, and same thing for Twitter and Sackheads and SHR, and essentially you can't throw a stone without hitting me somewhere, both figuratively and literally.
And, Sean, what are your final thoughts on what we've been talking about tonight, my friend?
Oh, you know what? It's a topsy-turvy world. I think the great Norm Peterson from Cheers said it best. It's a dog-eat-dog world, and we're all wearing Milk-Bone underwear right now. If we don't turn around and find a way to ground ourselves and find a way to get back on track with where our country needs to go, there's so many little things we can do. It starts at home. It starts in our neighborhoods. It starts in our churches and our places of business, etc. We need to be more vocal about conservatism. We need to be more proud. We need to get back to morals and doing the right things for one another, and stop just trying to appease the faux masses. And just like this was, and just like in California when they ruled that you have to that kids under the age of 17 can choose whichever bathroom they go to by how they identify that day. Was a rule that was put in place in California in schools, by the way. That's in schools. If you're a boy and you feel like a girl, you can go in the women's bathroom and vice versa. For less than 1% of the people, again, the liberal petri dish that is California, we need to stop those trends. We need to start legislating for what's best for the nation first, be it for Iran or be it for the protection of religious freedoms, the protection of Second Amendment. We've gotten away from that. We appease the loudest people versus the country in general, and that's something that really falls on to everybody in Congress right now. That trend needs to go away.
Ken, my friend, the final 4 minutes are all yours.
Well, I want to just take 2 minutes to thank you and all the guests on this particular program tonight. It is a great honor and privilege to have been on this particular panel. I know that I'm not the only person wearing tinfoil in the room, so I really appreciate that. I just want to thank you, sir, for including me. For those who wish to listen to my mind, thoughts, and ideas, you can easily turn to the Exceptional Conservative Show, which comes on Mondays through Thursdays from 9 to 11. You can go to the exceptionalconservativeshow.com for more details on all the other shows that I'm on. But I do want to say this. We have to be honest and truthful about where we are in this nation, just as we're honest and truthful with our church and our families. And when you're on the boat and there is water coming in, you have to admit that we're thinking lest everyone leaves their life. So the bottom line is we are, as a nation, or have been, transferred over to a despotism. And it's going to be up to Americans to get off the boat and find a way to turn this ship around in such a fashion that we go back to a constitutional republic. Anything less than that is merely just moving the chairs on the Titanic.
Well, I would like to thank Susan and Sean and Ken for joining me tonight and helping me kick off my show again. It's been an absolute joy. I'm very excited to be back on the air every Sunday night. News and Commentary with Dan Butcher will air every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. That would be 9 p.m. for you folks out on the East Coast. That's 6 p.m. for you folks out on the West Coast. You can also check out all of my Pundit Press news breaks on 3 times a day on SHR Media. Very excited to be doing that as well. So once again, Susan, Sean, and Ken, thank you for joining me for definitely one of the most amazing discussions I've ever had on one of my shows. Well, folks, we're up against the wall. We've run out of time. You've been listening to News and Commentary with Dan Butcher. I will be back with you again next Sunday night, same time, same place. Until then, God bless.
Thank you for using Blog Talk